In the ancient world, few rivalries were as intense or as consequential as the one between Rome and Carthage. These two great powers fought not just for land, but for supremacy over the Mediterranean world. It was a conflict that spanned over a century, with Rome ultimately emerging victorious. But for a time, Carthage was Rome's greatest threat. How did these two titans collide, and what led to Carthage's ultimate downfall? Let's journey back to the 3rd century BCE, when the stage was set for one of the most epic confrontations in all of history. Long before Rome rose to power, Carthage was the dominant force in the Western Mediterranean. Founded by Phoenician settlers around 814 BCE, Carthage quickly grew into a thriving city-state, located in present-day Tunisia. Its strategic location on the North African coast gave it access to key trade routes, allowing it to develop into a wealthy and powerful maritime empire. Carthage's strength lay in its navy, which controlled trade throughout the Mediterranean. Ships laden with goods from as far as Spain, Sicily, and the African interior filled its harbors, making it one of the richest cities of the ancient world. But Carthage's empire was not built on trade alone. Its military might was formidable. Carthaginian generals and mercenaries protected its far-flung territories and enforced its influence over neighboring regions. Their dominance of the seas meant that they rarely had to worry about any serious challengers. That was until Rome started to rise. Rome, meanwhile, began steadily growing in strength. Originally a small city-state in central Italy, Rome expanded its influence through alliances, treaties, and brutal military campaigns. By the early 3rd century BCE, Rome had conquered most of the Italian peninsula, turning its fierce and disciplined armies into an unstoppable force. However, while Rome's ambitions stretched beyond Italy, they would soon find themselves on a collision course with Carthage, whose interests in Sicily brought them dangerously close to Roman territories. The two powers could not be more different. Carthage was a wealthy naval-based trading empire, and Rome, by contrast, was a militaristic and land-based republic. As both sought to expand, it became clear that the Mediterranean was too small for the both of them. In 264 BCE, the First Punic War broke out. It began over a relatively minor dispute in Sicily, but it quickly spiraled into a massive conflict that lasted 23 years. At the time, Rome had little experience in naval warfare, while Carthage boasted the most powerful navy in all of the Mediterranean. Initially, the Romans struggled, suffering defeat after defeat out at sea. But what Rome lacked in experience, it made up for in adaptability. Roman engineers developed the corvus, which is a boarding device that turned naval battles into hand-to-hand combat, an area where Rome excelled. With this new tactic, they began to gain the upper hand. Over time, the Romans built up a formidable fleet and scored decisive victories, culminating in the Battle of the Aegaean Islands in 241 BCE. Carthage, exhausted and financially drained, was forced to sue for peace. In the aftermath, Carthage ceded control of Sicily to Rome, marking the first Roman province outside of the Italian peninsula. This victory signals Rome's arrival as a major Mediterranean power, but it also sowed the seeds for future conflict. The loss of Sicily was a devastating blow to Carthage, but the city remained resilient. Under the leadership of Hamilcar Barca, Carthage began rebuilding its power and expanding into Spain. The wealth of the Spanish mines provided Carthage with the resources that it needed to strengthen its army and prepare for a second round of conflict with Rome. Hamilcar's son, Hannibal Barca, inherited not just his father's military skills, but also his burning hatred for Rome. Hannibal had grown up hearing tales of Carthage's humiliation in the First Punic War, and he vowed to avenge his city. When Hannibal became commander of the Carthaginian forces in Spain, he wasted no time in provoking Rome. In 218 BCE, Hannibal attacked the Roman allied city of Saguntum in Spain, an act that sparked the Second Punic War. But Hannibal had no intention of fighting Rome on the same terms as his predecessors. He devised a bold and daring strategy. He would take the war to the gates of Rome itself. In one of the most audacious military maneuvers in history, Hannibal led a massive army, including elephants, across the Alps and into Italy. The journey was perilous. Harsh weather, difficult terrain, and constant attacks from hostile tribes decimated his forces. By the time that Hannibal reached Italy, he had lost nearly half of his army, but those who remained were hardened veterans that were ready for battle. Hannibal's invasion took the Romans completely by surprise. No one had expected him to attempt such a dangerous route, and for the next few years, he terrorized the Italian countryside, defeating Roman armies in a series of stunning victories. The battles of Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and most famously Cannae showcased Hannibal's tactical genius. At Cannae in 216 BCE, Hannibal lured a much larger Roman force into a trap, encircling and annihilating them. It was one of the most devastating defeats in Roman history, with over 50,000 Roman soldiers killed in one single day. Hannibal seemed unstoppable. But for all of his brilliance, Hannibal faced a critical challenge. He lacked the reinforcements and resources to lay siege to Rome itself. Despite his victories, Rome refused to surrender. Instead, the Roman Senate adopted a new strategy. They avoided direct confrontation with Hannibal, and while systematically undermining his allies and attacking Carthaginian interests elsewhere. Now, while Hannibal rampaged through Italy, Rome was not idle. The Roman general Publius Cornelius Scipio, later known as Scipio Africanus, took the fight to Carthage's holdings in Spain. Over several years, Scipio methodically dismantled Carthaginian power in Spain, depriving Hannibal of critical reinforcements and resources. Scipio's victories in Spain made him one of Rome's rising stars, and in 204 BCE, he proposed a bold plan: invade North Africa and force Hannibal to return home. The Senate initially was hesitant, but finally gave Scipio the command he sought. The invasion was a success, prompting Carthage to recall Hannibal from Italy. The final showdown between Hannibal and Scipio took place in 202 BCE at the Battle of Zama, just outside of Carthage. Both generals were at the height of their powers, but this time Scipio had the advantage. Using a combination of tactics that he learned from Hannibal and his superior cavalry forces, Scipio decisively defeated the Carthaginian army. Hannibal's defeat at Zama ended the Second Punic War. Carthage was forced to sue for peace once again, but this time the terms were far harsher. Carthage had to give up its navy, pay a massive war indemnity, and relinquish its empire, effectively becoming a client state of Rome. And although Carthage was crippled, it remained an important commercial hub. Over the next few decades, it slowly recovered economically, which alarmed certain factions in Rome. The Roman statesman Cato the Elder famously ended his speeches with the phrase, "Carthago delenda est." Carthage must be destroyed. In 149 BCE, Rome found a pretext to declare war once more, igniting the Third Punic War. Now, this time, Rome's goal was not just to defeat Carthage, but to erase it from the map entirely. After a brutal 3-year siege, the city finally fell in 146 BCE. The Romans razed Carthage to the ground, sold its surviving inhabitants into slavery, and salted the earth to ensure that nothing would ever grow there again. Carthage, once a proud and powerful empire, was no more. The Punic Wars transformed Rome from a regional power into a dominant force of the Mediterranean. Carthage, Rome's greatest rival, had been wiped out, leaving Rome free to expand its influence across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East. The wars also shaped Rome's military and political strategies, laying the groundwork for what would become one of the greatest empires in all of history. Yet, Carthage's legacy still endures. The memory of Hannibal, one of the greatest military commanders in history, still captures the imagination. His brilliant tactics and daring strategies are studied in military academies around the world to this day. Rome may have won the war, but in many ways it was Carthage and Hannibal that set the stage for Rome's future greatness. So as we look back at this monumental clash between two ancient superpowers, we're left with one lingering question. What if Carthage had won? How different would the history of the Mediterranean and the world be? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and hey, don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic stories of the past.